books like this are a catalyst for conversation and they break down walls. So I think people feel like they can expose their vulnerabilities. They feel like they're not alone. They're in a safe space. They're talking to people who know, who understand what they're going through. For a lot of people don't have that in their lives. They don't, unless they're really proactive in seeking out like a support group or things like that, or like if your loved one is in a care home, you're going to be around more people that are, also in your situation. But a lot of people who are just at home, they might not even have anybody to talk to that understands what they're going through. So, and it's soft because it's a novel. It's a soft entry. It's not a book of hard facts, just presented to you in a way
Yeah.
that maybe they don't really mean anything to you because you don't know anybody that has this. But this way I kind of like sneak in a lot of knowledge. People walk away knowing a little bit.
Welcome to the AlzAuthors podcast. We're so glad you found us. We're the global community of authors writing about Alzheimer's and dementia from personal experience to light the way for others. I'm Marianne Sciucco, a registered nurse, author, and dementia daughter.
And I'm Christy Byrne Yates, a licensed educational psychologist, dementia daughter, Al's author, and coach focused on the sandwich generation. Please join us for bi-weekly episodes with our authors as we talk about their dementia journeys, sharing intimate details and painfully obtained knowledge to help others currently on that path.
We hope these stories offer you comfort and support as we strive to break the silence and stigma surrounding a dementia diagnosis.
May one of our authors speak to your experience.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Hi, it's Marianne with exciting news. AlzAuthors has published a brand new anthology, Poetry for the Dementia Journey, now available in ebook and paperback through Amazon. Within its pages, you'll discover a variety of voices writing about the diversity of dementia care experiences, caring for a mother or father or spouse, witnessing the decline of a sibling, reflections on the time before the diagnosis, the years of care, and the aftermath. Poetry provides us with a meaningful way to explore our experience and emotions regarding dementia and to express ourselves when we encounter the many different joys and dilemmas caregiving can bring. You'll find details on how to order the book in the show notes. Please remember to leave a review on the book sales page once you've read it. Reviews do help boost a book's visibility and helps readers find it. Thank you for your support of our efforts to erase the silence and stigma that often accompany a dementia diagnosis.
Hi, welcome to Books and Chit Chat with Aging and Amazing. Thank you for spending your precious time with us. I'm Christy Byrne Yates, a manager at AlzAuthors, the global community of authors writing about Alzheimer's and dementia from a personal experience to light the way for others. I'm here tonight with Malika Moore of Aging and Amazing, a wonderful organization that values healthy aging and caregiving. One side of the organization focuses on care management. The other side of the organization focuses on their signature online community. Within this online community, over 200 members from around the world share their stories, resources, and tips to help support caregivers and those who are aging. Check out their online community to learn more. We're all aging and amazing. I'd like to introduce some of the members of our team who are with us tonight. I'm not sure who's coming, except I do know our author is one of our team members. So I'll get to that in a minute. But I want to introduce Ruth Stevens. Ruth is an author, and she was the author of Stage 7, and we had her as a book club author. And she's got another book coming out, so we're excited to hear about that. And then Sue Lick is also a member of the AlzAuthors team, so really excited to see you both here. Let's see, Vicki Tapia is here with us, and Vicki is also a founding member, so this is great. So we've got some of our team members here, and we're always excited about that. And we see some returning folks, and I'm so excited everybody's here. It's fantastic. We are honored to have AlzAuthor founder and manager and board president and podcast producer and host Marianne Sciucco here to discuss her novel, Blue Hydrangeas, an Alzheimer's love story. Welcome, Marianne.
Hey, Christy. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Oh, well, this is a treat because you've interviewed me before. I've never interviewed you. This is terrific. And I'm so excited to be able to talk about your book, which I loved. So it was really wonderful. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, let's get into it. And maybe you can tell us, start off with, tell us a little bit about your dementia journey and why you chose to write a book about Alzheimer's.
Okay. First of all, I did want to say that the reason why Christy and I are the authors for the book club in July and August is because we interview everybody, but then nobody really knows about us. So we thought, well, why don't we let people know our story and what we do? So instead of always interviewing everyone else. But I'm a registered nurse. And right around the time that I started entertaining going into nursing, I had an aunt, my mom's sister. She was 15 years older than her, and she had Alzheimer's. And I was in my mid to late 20s at the time and didn't understand anything about this, had no knowledge. It was in the 1980s. And it was just so heart-wrenching, and I didn't really understand it. And then my father's sister, also 15 years older than my father, she also had it. So I had it on both sides of the family. And when I went into nursing care, I started out in a nursing home and wound up working on the dementia floor by choice.
Okay.
And people thought I was nuts because when I first started working there, they didn't even bring me up there on the tour. They said, oh, yeah, the third floor, and well, we're not going to go up there. And then when I would go to work at night, people would tell me, oh, you don't ever want to go up there. People would get pulled and have to float, and they'd have a fit, and they'd be so upset. And I was kind of like, what's going on up there? So one night it was my turn to get pulled after I'd been there for a while. And they said, we need you to go up to the third floor and help out up there. Somebody called in sick. So I was so afraid. I said, what's going to happen to me up there? What is happening? I don't understand what's going on with these people. There's like 50 people up there who all have dementia. And I loved it. I had a wonderful time.
That's great.
And I said, you can bring me up there anytime. And so that's what ended up happening. It became my routine. But I worked all over the place in that building and encountered people in various stages of dementia. So I was very intrigued by it. And I used to always want to find solutions to try to help them and to keep them comfortable, especially like to make sure that they ate, because that was like a big thing. So I was like 29 years old, and I had to make a life transition and choose a new career. So another whole story. But I ended up going into nursing. I went in LPN school to start and went into working in long-term care with dementia, and then became an RN and went into hospital care and worked as a case manager. And that's when I met the people who inspired me to write my book. So it had always been my lifelong dream that I would write a book someday. And I decided, it was 2001, I think it was. I decided I was going to start writing a story, and I really didn't have a great idea wasn't fleshed out very well, and it wasn't really going anywhere. And then I met this couple, and they just captivated my imagination. And she had Alzheimer's, and he did not. He was very frail. They were in their mid-80s. She was 86. And they were adorable. And I met them in the rehab unit because they had traveled all the way from the state of Florida to New York on their own, driving. And I was just astounded by this because it just didn't seem like they could do it. And then after they got back home, she ended up falling and she fractured her pelvis. So they ended up in my rehab unit. And the plan was for them to go to her to go to a nursing home as the next step to get more rehab. So their son was visiting them the day before she had to leave, and he asked me if it would be all right if he drove his parents to the facility. He didn't want his father to drive the mother. So I said, yeah, you can do that. That's fine. That happens all the time. So after I left them, I couldn't stop thinking about them. I was like, well, what would happen if they somehow escaped from the hospital without their son? Where would they go? What would they do? It just really intrigued me. And so I started coming up with the whole story. And the first draft of the story was about 60 pages, because I didn't call it a book, I called it a story. And a lot of it was from the point of view of Jack. So I chose to write about Jack as the main character in this book because I wanted to write a book about the male caregiver, the husband caring for the wife, because a lot of times people think a caregiver, typically it's a woman, taking care of kids, taking care of their husband, taking care of their parents. And I knew from my work experience that there are a lot of great guys out there doing excellent care for their spouses, and we're very dedicated and involved in loving. So I said, I'm going to try to write a book and try to elevate the role of the male caregiver. So that's why I chose, because I could have written it from any perspective, right?
Yeah.
Some of it's written from her perspective, and all the chapters break down, and you are getting a little glimpse into other people's reactions to this situation. So the first of it was pretty slim. And then I started thinking about it more, and I thought, gee, I need to beef this up a little bit and introduce some more of what's going on in this situation. So I started to tell the viewpoint of their son and the daughter-in-law and the grandchildren, and then her best friend and Sarah's point of view. That was the last, and that was the most challenging, because there's like, what do I know about living with dementia? I don't know anything. I'm an outside observer. I don't know how it feels or what's going on in that person's mind. None of us do. So I did a lot of research, and I hope, and I've been told that I did a good job with it. So I hope that I did. But, just different scenes with her, not knowing where she is and waking up at the hospital and being very confused by everything, and having her moments of clarity, which were really important, I think, because I think that's what, in the story, that's what kept Jack going, with those little moments of clarity, and that gave him hope. And I think a lot of people, they live for that. Jack, it's not even wrote, he lived for those moments when she would come back to him. So in the meantime, so I published the book, and that's another story, a long publishing journey. But I ended up meeting with Vicki and Jean Lee, and we decided to work together to promote our books back in 2015. And right around that time was when my stepfather was diagnosed. So I had taken my mom and her husband to a lawyer the year before, because I wanted them to complete their last will and testament, the healthcare proxy, the power of attorney, all that paperwork. And it was so good that I did, because a year later I needed it. So it was great, because I had Vicki and Jean on my side, we were close. And AlzAuthors was just in the beginning of its life. So that really helped me a lot. And I took care of him for he was diagnosed in December of 2015. He passed away in January 2018. So it was about 3 years. And it was really, it was hard. And,
it's hard. Yeah.
I can't, everybody here knows that.
Yeah. Well, in listening to you and how you came to this, I can really see, and what I want to say, first of all, is I think you really did represent very well all those different aspects. So hearing a little bit about what Jack is feeling, mostly Jack, but those other folks, right? Their son, David, Derek, Rose, and even hearing from Sarah a little bit, it was just beautiful.
Thank you.
It was such a Yeah, and it was such a beautiful read. Like it's one of those ones that I didn't have to put it down, you know. It was so easy to go through and I felt involved with the folks. So that's what I love in a fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a lot of things I loved about the story, but I think you really represented all those different feelings that everyone it impacts everyone. I loved hearing that you talked about the sandwich generation. You know, that's my
Mm-hmm.
thing. So that was great.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, wow, see, there it is. This is what it's
Yeah.
like, people.
Yeah.
So it was great that way. I did want to ask you, and I'm going to ask you to read a little bit, and I'm sure you have something wonderful prepared. But a couple of the questions I had, and then we'll hear from you, and then we'll get some questions. I wanted to know about the role of Lisa, the daughter, and she comes to us about middle of the book, I think, and then we hear about her, and then we learn more. But can you tell us what role she serves in the book?
Mm-hmm. So the first draft, it was like a 60-page outline, really. And one of the things that I thought was that so these people are wrestling with Alzheimer's disease and they're in their 70s. But what else has happened to them in their life? They can't have had a perfect life. So I had to give them more angst. I wanted them to have more tragedy in their lifetime. I mean, they were 50 something year marriage. So that's when I came upon the idea because I was going to write a daughter into the story and I was going to write, it became Lisa, the deceased 16-year-old. But the other option was I was going to write like a sister who was like all business and all about the money and all about, you know, the legals and all about that piece
Oh,
and not supporting the emotional side of it and all of that, like being in denial. And then I decided, no, I didn't want to write that person. So I came up
yeah,
with the concept of Lisa,
yeah,
their
okay.
greatest loss.
Yeah, yeah, it was so moving. It was very moving. Um, The other thing I wanted to ask about is one of the things I loved about it was learning. You really go into like I felt like I lived on Cape Cod, you know,
Oh,
and I've
yeah.
never really been on Cape Cod. So I've been to Nantucket once, but I never made it to Cape Cod. And I know that you're from Boston area, but maybe you can tell us about your love of Cape Cod and why you know, I loved that so much, but it was great the way you describe all of it, the different highways and freeways and the different towns and the different places and where they went to eat at the lobster pot and things like that. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your
It
love
really is a
for,
lobster pot. Yeah.
yeah.
So I grew up about less than an hour from the Cape. So going there was like just something that we did. And then when I was a young adult, I went more frequently. My mother's husband owned some timeshare units down in Provincetown, which is at the very tip of Cape Cod, which is where the story has its climax. And so I also, even before he entered the picture, had a job where I worked for the American Heart Association. I was the field manager for Cape Cod and the islands. And I ended up moving down there and I lived down there for a while. And my job was to drive all over the place and meet people, business people and organizational leaders and stuff. So I got to know it really well.
Okay.
So that's why I set it there. I wanted to put them in a beautiful place. And so they were New Yorkers. So they were actually came from where I live. So, you know, but they had always gone to the Cape. They went there on their honeymoon and fell in love with it. And so they would go back every year, year after year after year. And with the dream that one day they would buy their house, they would build a house there, which they did. Blue Hydrangeas. It's an inn. It's a bed and breakfast.
Wow.
And so then
So it's a,
I was like, I was going to name their house. And so I was thinking about all these names for houses because when you go down the Cape, everybody has a
yeah,
name on their house. So I was thinking, well, what kind of people name their house? And I was like, innkeepers. And that's how I came up with the idea. Okay, so
right.
they live in an inn. They're bed and breakfast owners. That's what they do. And then I was thinking about all kinds of different names. And then I came up with Blue Hydrangeas because I love them. And they're
Yeah.
abundant on the Cape and they're gorgeous everywhere. So I made that like a focal point of the
Yeah.
house, the property, And then also that she was an artist, and that was her thing, was painting the pictures of the blue hydrangeas and the Cape Cod scenes.
Yeah. That's lovely. That's lovely.
Mm.
I was thinking, I wonder, you've probably been to some of these inns and they must just be beautiful. And this is kind of the way of life there during
Yeah.
summers and that
Yeah,
kind of
it
thing.
is. I haven't been there in a long time, really, since, my mom and her husband, that's where they lived the end of their lives. And so a place that was so meaningful and beautiful to me also has some really sad memories on a number of levels. So I kind of haven't been
Yeah.
going down there a lot. Well, my daughter lives in Europe now, so
Mhm.
that's where we go. But I may get down there this summer. We're kind of like talking about going down for a few days, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to go and I want to stay all summer. It's not possible.
Now, did you write from memory of all these places and the different roads, or did you go and kind of travel them again and think about
Yeah,
it?
I did both. Every time we
Okay.
went there on vacation, I was like taking notes and going
Yeah.
places that I wanted to make sure, like, oh, those places are real. The beaches are real.
Yeah.
The Lobster Pot is a real restaurant. We used to eat there all the time, and other places. But Falmouth Port, their town where they live, that is made up. I kind of
Okay.
situated them in this area in the Upper Cape called New Seabury, which is an exclusive community,
Okay.
wealthy homes and things. I don't think they have a bed and breakfast there, though, although they do have a very nice hotel.
Hmm.
But I wanted to give it its own name so that I could make it be whatever I wanted it to be. So if you
Got it.
like write about a town, then you have to be a little more accurate about how you present it, because people who live there or know it are going to complain if you get it wrong. So I said, well, if I just, and everything down there is port, Yarmouth Port, Hyannis Port. So
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
like, how about Falmouth Port? There is no Falmouth Port. There's Falmouth, West Falmouth, East Falmouth,
Right.
but no Falmouth Port. So I
Yeah.
named it Falmouth Port and put them there.
Excellent. I did look that up. I was looking and I kept finding Falmouth and I couldn't find Falmouth Port. So I was like, okay, well,
Yeah.
I'm sure she'll tell
Falmouth
me.
is a big town. It's on the
Yeah.
Upper
Yeah.
Cape. So it's when you first
Yeah.
go over the bridge, the Bourne Bridge.
Yeah.
Mm.
And then I have this version of your book. It's the same version, but it's a different cover. And I understand I know you've just recently released another cover. Can you tell us about the covers and the story behind the different
Mhm.
covers?
Yeah, covers are really important for many different reasons. So when I published the book, I did it myself and I didn't know what I was doing. And I had no budget. So I came up with my own cover and it looked like this. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah. Okay. It's
So I
like a
had just a black
brain. Yeah.
background with the blue hydrangeas, and the one in the back is all fuzzy. It's out of
Okay.
focus. And that
Right.
represented Jack and Sarah. And that's why I selected that photo. And people really loved it. But, the more I looked at it as time went on, I said, it doesn't really tell you what the book is about. People used to always ask me, and I used to say, and that was like another thing. They'd say, what's your book about? Well, it's about a couple. They have Alzheimer's. They live on Cape Cod. It's a love story. And then I had this thing where, don't ask me why, I didn't want to be perceived as trying to make money off of somebody's tragedy. So I didn't want to really like promote it for Alzheimer's. And then one day I'm describing it to somebody, and I'm like, it's an Alzheimer's love story. That's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
what it is. Why am I trying to not explain it as exactly what it is? So then I put those words on the book cover, an Alzheimer's love story, which is
Got
on
it.
this iteration. So at this point, I had earned money, actually made money on the book. So I used it to have a new cover design, and in the interior, the whole thing was redesigned by a professional
Nice.
book person. So she put this together for me. And I love the photograph. She sent me a whole bunch of photographs. I was really making her crazy because I didn't like any of them. And she was like getting frustrated with me. And she says, well, I have one more. And it was this photo of this couple, looked like they're dancing or embracing right on the beach. And I loved it because I loved the way that he's looking down at her with so much love. And she's looking up at him and she's like blank.
Yeah.
Her expression is just like blank. So I just thought that represented them. So then what happened is I wrote a prequel to this book called Christmas at Blue Hydrangeas. And then I have another one in the works called A Wedding at Blue Hydrangeas, which is the story of David and Ann's wedding. And these things occur 20 years prior to this illness. So I decided I wanted all the books to like look-alike. So one of my partners at AlzAuthors, Catherine Harrison, is a professional artist, and she came up with this cover design.
Right.
It's she drew it herself with the house in the background, and then it's like the house is at Christmas time. There's a different one, and then the one at the wedding has the bride, walking up, and you can see the house all decked out for the 4th of July and everything. So that's how that happened, and hopefully that's the last one.
So it is a trilogy. So that's wonderful. So the other two take place before this one.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
people would tell me they want to know about the inn. Is it a real
Yeah.
place? How do I get there? I can't tell you how many people would say to me, "How do I get there?" I'm like, "Well, you don't get there. It's in my mind. Nobody can get. I can't even get there." I used to look for it when we would be driving around on the Cape.
I'll bet.
Let's see if we can find one called Blue Hydrangeas. Let's see if we can find one that looks like the Blue Hydrangeas in my mind, but we never did. Although we did
Yeah.
find a lot of them that had the blue hydrangeas like up on their property, so that was beautiful. But people would say, "What happens next? What happened to them?" And the Christmas, they asked about Christmas, so I said, "All right, I'll write a Christmas book." And the Christmas book, I really love that one, and it's 1978. There's a blizzard coming on Christmas Eve. They did have a blizzard there in February of 78, but I made a new one. And she's all alone at the house waiting for David and Jack to arrive Christmas Eve. And just shows her like alone and making preparations and cooking and doing gifts. And the Christmas tree arrives and the snow's piling up and it's getting worse and worse. And David arrives with somebody. He tells his mother, "I'm bringing a friend up with me for Christmas." And she's like, "Oh, that's wonderful." She thinks it's a guy. And then when he shows up, he's got a girl. Who is this? She didn't know anything about her. And then ends up becoming his wife. And then they have some other surprise guests that show up. And it's a really terrific story. It's a short read. And the thing about it is all three of the books, they all have this common theme of grief.
Yeah. Okay.
Because in the first two, in the prequels, it's not that long after the death of Lisa. It's like
Got it.
5 years. So it's still very fresh.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Sarah's always trying to, she's like, I call her Scarlett O'Hara. I'll think about it tomorrow. Like whenever her grief intrudes upon her, she just is like, I can't do it right now. I'm busy. I'll think about it tomorrow or later on when I'm by myself somewhere. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So the grief is important because in Blue Hydrangeas, Jack is left to carry the grief on his own because he's forgotten. She forgets that they had a daughter and she forgets what happened to her.
And I thought that was very interesting that they were there in the area where it happened, and he was so terrified that it would bring memories and that would be too much for her, which may very well have been the case. But that was an interesting piece that you put in there for that. Yeah. I like that, and I also and I think I've shared with you, just all the different things, Jack's not necessarily a healthy person. And we, here at AlzAuthors, we are always talking about dementia, but there are all these other things that folks are going through in their lives. It could be the trauma of loss, but it could be also our own different health issues and things like that. So for me, it's just very true to life, what's going on with people. And I loved that aspect of it. So I think it's a terrific one. And I know you have questions in the back for book clubs, and that was really, I think, very helpful too. Mm-hmm. Do you get asked to talk to different book groups at all? Do you get asked to be? Yeah. How do you find that? I mean, how do you do you enjoy that? How does that go for you?
It's always nerve-wracking because you hope that everybody loved the book, and there's always going to be somebody who maybe they didn't, and they have to come and tell you. But most of the time, people are very gracious, and we have a good discussion. And a lot of times, people are happy because they don't know anything about this subject, and they're happy to be able to, learn a little bit about it. It's always good to know before it happens to you that this is what's going on. This is a reality that a lot of people are living with.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd like to hear you read a piece that you would like to share with us.
Okay. So when I read, I usually read the part of the prologue.
Hmm.
Uh, it's not too long. Kind of sets us up for the story, and it's 9 years before the story really starts. So it's the very day of diagnosis. While night settled on blue hydrangeas, Jack and Sarah lay nestled on the couch, wrapped in a hand-knit afghan, clinging to each other as silent as stones. The lights were out, a crackling fire lit the room, and shadows danced on the walls. He cradled her in his arms and stared into space, detached. She focused on the fire, unyielding in his embrace, so far away. The bark he had put on the CD player had long ended. Outside, the first snowfall of winter blanketed Cape Cod. He had done all he could to make this evening the same as any other, but this god-awful quiet made everything seem so wrong. After 45 years of marriage, it wouldn't have surprised him if they had run out of things to say, but not a day ended without some new insight or tidbit of information passing between them. They shared everything, their deepest fears, their most private thoughts. Tonight, there was nothing, just this palpable silence as they ruminated separately on their visit to Dr. Fallon and the horrifying news he had given them. Jack pondered the same troublesome thoughts over and over, making no progress in absorbing the doctor's diagnosis. He knew enough about Alzheimer's to fill him with fear, a fear he had not experienced since his days as a medic in World War II. Back then, he had lived in anticipation of the next strike, the next slew of casualties. He could not sleep, he could not eat. Uncertainty consumed every moment. Sarah's Alzheimer's filled him with the same fear and anxiety. He did not know what to expect, or when, or how bad it would be. Some situations defy words, and there were no words, no phony reassurances to make this right. If there were, he could not pretend to know them. The room grew dark as the fire burned low. The logs he had stoked an hour before were turning to ash. Neither of them had the drive or the energy to get up and throw on another log. At last, she broke through the mournful silence. I'm going to lose everything, she said, her voice a hoary whisper, a voice he had never heard before. Don't say that, he started, but she interrupted. Whatever happens, she said, stay with me. I can't bear to suffer through this without you. A single tear rolled down her cheek. Shh, Jack whispered. He brushed away the tear and made a promise only prayer would help him keep. Nothing like that is going to happen. I'll never leave you. We're staying right here. He pulled the afghan tighter around them, sealing out the chill that slowly descended on the room as the fire waned. They sat in silence for a long time, long enough for the fire to go out, and then he helped her off the couch and took her to bed.
Yeah,
So
that's so
in that,
beautiful.
it's his first night as caregiver.
Yeah,
He took
yeah,
her to bed.
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
it's also symbolizing the winter of their marriage has just
Hmm.
begun because
Yeah.
it's the first snowfall of winter. And, he, like a lot of people, he makes that promise, I mean, we hear it all the time. Everybody,
Hmm.
oh, I'm never going to leave you. I'm not going to put you in a home, and
Hmm.
it becomes like the doctor says, this is bigger than both of you.
Exactly. And I definitely want to get into that. I see Ruth has a question, so I want to see if she can unmute and, yeah, go
I
ahead.
can. Yeah, that was a lovely passage,
Thank
Marianne.
you.
I liked that, revisiting that. I had actually raised my hand before when you brought up book clubs.
Mhm.
I was curious to know when you appear at book clubs, do you often find that the discussion gets very personal, that people kind of sometimes talk about their own experiences as much as the book?
Oh yeah. Yeah, books like this are a catalyst for conversation and they break down walls. So I think people feel like they can expose their vulnerabilities. They feel like they're not alone. They're in a safe space. They're talking to people who know, who understand what they're going through. For a lot of people don't have that in their lives. They don't, unless they're really proactive in seeking out like a support group or things like that, or like if your loved one is in a care home, you're going to be around more people that are, also in your situation. But a lot of people who are just at home, they might not even have anybody to talk to that understands what they're going through. So I think that the books, and in your book too, Ruth, I mean, really,
Yeah.
and it's soft because it's a novel. It's a soft entry. It's not a book of hard facts, just presented to you in a way
Yeah.
that maybe they don't really mean anything to you because you don't know anybody that has this. But this way I kind of like sneak in a lot of knowledge. People walk away knowing a little bit.
Yes, exactly. My last book club meeting on my book, two people were actually crying. That was a first for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think fiction does that. I think, Marianne, you said it so well. It's a soft landing. And it's we have so many wonderful nonfiction books that tell real stories of people's situations. And those are wonderful and really necessary. And then there's fiction that allows us to imagine on some level. And it introduces a lot of interesting topics. And I think, so you just mentioned, the whole piece about making promises that you might not be able to keep. And there's definitely a lot of people have very strong feelings about nursing homes or assisted living or memory care. And people make promises sometimes that they can't keep, or they really go to extremes to keep that promise in a way that ends up harming their own self, or can be really detrimental. So I think, and that's not to say that everyone who has Alzheimer's needs to be in a memory care facility. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying when you at the beginning of a diagnosis make a decision, and you may not be able to do that. So that promise can be very hard for someone. And I know it tortured Jack. So that was
Jack, yeah.
He really struggled.
He did, and he was very stoic, and he wanted to bear it all on his own. Like, he didn't want to be a burden to others. He didn't want to intrude on anybody else, not even his son.
Yeah.
And his son wanted to help. They were right there the whole time, and he didn't want it.
Yeah. Barbara, would you like to ask your question? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Marianne, for that reading.
Thank you.
And I lived in Western Massachusetts for 4 years, and when I was a teenager, so we would go out to the Cape for vacations and stuff. So it's such an evocative place to set your story.
Yeah.
I was curious, how does your training as a nurse influence you as a writer, and in particular with Blue Hydrangeas, or maybe it's not particular to Blue Hydrangeas?
No, I mean, it really is. I always say that, being a nurse gives you a front row seat in the theater of life. And I have been involved in or witnessed some incredibly dramatic and traumatic situations, not that you want to, but you find yourself just immersed in like somebody else's worst thing that could happen to them. And sometimes it would be a great thing, but a lot of times it would, people are in the hospital because not for good reasons for most times. And when I was in case management, what part of the job was counseling families with people with dementia and helping them to get resources and services in the community. So I had, by that time, developed a spiel. I had a speech, and I had it organized, boop, 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 point after point. And I would go from one family to another family to another family. I'd do it several times a day and just spew out all that information. Then when it happened to me, I forgot everything. I was the daughter, and then all of a sudden I'm like, I don't know what to do. Then I said, put your nursing cap on and you'll figure it out. So I did. And I was able to use all of that, in writing the book. And, I made the nurse was the one who makes the mistake, The nurse was at fault for allowing them to leave. I made her be bad. And then the case manager, she was like a drill sergeant. I knew people like that. But I wasn't like that. I was a softie. Yeah, I was a softie. I was not like that. I used to go one of the things I used to do is like a lot of people, and it happened to me too, is that if the loved one has to go to a facility, then people want to have some say and some choice. And a lot of times you don't. And when I could see that this was looming on the horizon, and I would ask them, if this has to happen, where would you like this person to land? And they would tell me, where they didn't want them to land too. Oh, I don't want my mother to go here. But they would say, I'd really like them to go here. And so I had tentacles in the community. So I would contact my point person at that facility and let them know I had somebody that I was, I would be sending them information in a few days. Do they have room? And a lot of times I got people in to the place of their choice. That was, to me, it's like so important. It's a bad thing to do. And then if you have to send them somewhere you don't want them to be, or it's like 50 miles from home, as Sue knows, it makes the situation like 100 times worse, because you want to be able to be there. And with Jack, he went every day, he had lunch. Mm-hmm. He wanted to pick out the place, and he chose the first place he went to.
And so that was another question I had about placing it in Cape Cod. I don't know Cape Cod, but I imagine it's bustling in the spring and summertime. Mm-hmm. But are there a lot of people that live there year round, such that there would be a lot of services?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay. It's a big place. I mean, there's lots of people live there all year long. Okay. So, and there are a lot of very high-end assisted living memory care places.
Great. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I just remember the one time I was in Nantucket was in an off-season time, and there was hardly anything going on.
Oh, yeah. That's got a very small population. I mean, like places like Falmouth and Hyannis and the whole Mid-Cape region. It's huge. It has a large population year-round. People love to live there year-round. It's got a great climate. People love the outdoors. Like I always say, that you could live there your whole life and never see it all.
Wow.
There's so many like little places, little inlets and trails and parks, or like just along the coast. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's really beautiful.
That's fantastic. I want to open up the room for anybody else if we have any other comments or questions. Roseanne? Yeah.
Marianne, you wrote a lovely book. I just heard what you read, and it was wonderful. And I had a quick question. How do you find out about the book clubs? Because I wrote a book too about Alzheimer's, and when I've addressed them, it's been through word of mouth. This friend told that friend. Do you, aside from, your friends and family, how do you find out about book clubs to address?
Well, I mean, you can still like directories online where people can sign up book clubs if you did a search. And they break it down like by your region. Of course, everything now is usually done online for obvious reasons of the convenience. When I was going out, but like before COVID, to different places, I was like tapped. I would just reach out, like I cold call or send a letter to a facility and follow up with a phone call. And I had one facility not far from my house who invited me to come in and do the book club with their organization, which turned out to be really wonderful. And they treated me like a queen. It was really great. And then I was in with the Alzheimer's Association, so they invited me to do something with them in my local place. But a lot of it's word of mouth. I did things with my library. I was very active in the library and ended up being on the board of trustees, but I used to organize a local author event with them every year. So I would meet people that way. And being working in the hospital and being in touch with people who service that community was also a big help for me.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So, Marianne, you've written now 3 books about blue hydrangeas and the whole journey around Alzheimer's, and you're a founder of AlzAuthors. I'm sure you're learning all the time. What would you say to folks who might be hearing this podcast or watching the YouTube video? What are some things you would want people to know about getting a diagnosis about a family member, and what are some insights that you would share?
I went through that with my stepfather. So he was always a little bit of a problem. He was born premature in 1936 and suffered some brain injury. So he was a little slow most of his life. He was very high functioning, but he had a very low IQ. And he could be his behavior wasn't always what we both really like. He could be really hard, and he was a jokester and a prankster, and it could be very inappropriate at times. And then as he got older, it kind of got worse, but everybody just thought, oh, that's just him. And then it really reached like a pinnacle. And I was getting phone calls from people left and right asking me what was wrong with him and stuff. And I didn't live near them. I lived 250 miles away. And when I would visit frequently, and when one time I visited and he was disastrous. He hadn't bathed or showered or anything for like weeks. My mother was beside herself. She said, will you help me? I don't know what to do with him. And I said, yes, I will help you. And I already knew what was going on. I had a really strong suspicion, but I didn't want to tell her. I said, but when we start on this path, we're going to go all the way. We're not going to like stop. I'm not going to start this medical journey and then have you tell me we don't want to go anymore when it starts to get nasty. So that's exactly what happened. And then I made all the appointments. We brought him the very first time to a doctor. He wanted a woman doctor. We had to change doctors because their doctor didn't want to know anything about this. I would call him. I went to the office with them. I wrote him letters and he just was like not willing to pursue it. My mother would say, we're fine. And he would say, they're fine. So I said, why don't we get another doctor? So she said, he likes a woman doctor. Can we get a woman? I said, yes, we will. And we did. Got an excellent one. And it was called Complex Geriatric Management. That was the name of the practice. I said, oh, this is perfect. And the first day I brought him in there, they told me he has dementia and he needs to go into memory care. And I couldn't believe, even though I was feeling that this was going to happen, I couldn't believe it. I said, this is the first doctor visit. How dare you tell me I have to have him in memory care? What do you mean? Can't I get a home health aide? Can't we just put him on some antidepressants? I was just like, not buying into it. And then my mother didn't want to pursue it anymore. She said to me, we're not going to the doctor anymore. He doesn't want to go. He's fine. I said, no. I said, this doctor thinks he has dementia. He doesn't have it. I said, well, then we need to go and we need to make sure he doesn't have it. We need to find out what's wrong. We owe him that, Mom. We need to know. We can't just pretend everything's fine. So she said, okay. And, he went to the psychiatrist and the neurologist and he had the MRIs and all kinds of testing and stuff. And so it was so important. We needed to know what was wrong with him because it might not be dementia.
Right.
It can be a lot of other things. And a lot of people say, well, he's old, so this is how he's going to be. But, what if that person has some kind of metabolic problem that you can correct and you didn't do that because you didn't
exactly.
know.
Yeah.
And you need to know. And then once you know, then you need to have a plan and you need to know, what are we going to do? How are we going to handle this? How are we going to live with this? Who's going to help? Where do we go? There's a million questions. We've got a ton of books about that. But you need to really have knowledge.
Right.
You're not going to get through it without knowledge. It's going to be 100 times harder when you don't know what you're doing.
Right. And it's heartening to know that you had a position as a case manager and were there to help families, because I think it's that might be a piece that's missing in some places. I think it's sort of like some places have it, some places don't. And if you're not even aware of the concept of case management, and there are geriatric case managers, but you don't know this until you know it. There's so much that we don't know what we don't know. And it's so helpful then to have that. So that's very heartening to know had that.
The Alzheimer's Association, like where I live, they have case management services.
Yeah. Yes, they do.
So that's a place where you can call and you can get an appointment with somebody to help you navigate what's available in your community. What kind of paperwork do you need to gather? What can you expect? How much is it going to cost? The 101,000 questions that people have. That's a really good place to start. But I'll tell you, in my work, not everybody took the time to talk to people like I did. A lot of people were just like, well, they have dementia, so, put them in a nursing home. And that was their attitude.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And
then I think
I was sensitive to like the families too, and what they were going
Yes.
through. Because I had been seeing it, we lived
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah. That's what I was going to say is that there's the person that we have to care for, and then the family. There's so much on their plate, and helping them, because it is just like you portrayed in your story, in your novel. There's a whole family is impacted in many different ways, and so finding ways to help people through that. So that's what I think is really beautiful about the story. So many things. So Marianne, what else have you written? Because I know you love to write and have written many things. So I'd like to hear more about your other works.
I wrote a young adult novel that's like 600 pages called Swim Season. And it's based on my experience with my daughter as a competitive swimmer for 11 years. She swam all through middle school, high school, and college. And that was a really fun book to write.
Excellent.
So it's nothing like Blue Hydrangeas at all. It's like a whole different time of life. But, there are some serious health issues involving the main character's mom, who was a nurse in the army and went to Afghanistan to take care of the soldiers and came back wounded. She was a wounded warrior, and she came back with chronic pain and an opioid addiction.
Oh my gosh.
So we go into substance abuse and mental health issues in that. So, and then I wrote 3 short stories. I published 2 of them are based upon experiences I had as a child. And then the other one is Eno's Love, which is a Christmas story. And little old Eno lives in in New York's Little Italy in a 3rd floor walk up, and she has a little bit of forgetfulness and diabetes and other health concerns too. And that was those are all short stories, so they're really quick reads. And all my books are available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook.
I was just going to ask. And do you narrate it on audio? Okay, you found
No,
somebody to do
I hired narrators to do that work because narrating is one thing, and then you have to produce the files, and
Right.
get involved with that.
Yeah. And so you've told us where you can find your book. You're available Amazon and some other places as well. You're on
in all
Ingram.
the stores pretty much. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kobo.
Got it.
A lot of them all over the world.
Yeah.
And you can just, look it up online and find. It's on my website. You can find out where to get it. So,
and your website is
MarianneSciucco.com.
There you go.
And it's available on AlzAuthors website as well.
Absolutely. Anybody else have any quick questions or comments for Marianne? Really excited to have her here. Okay. And anything else that you would want to tell us, Marianne? Things that I know you're still working on finishing up the last of the trilogy, right? But other projects besides the podcast and everything you do for AlzAuthors.
I just want people to know that they're not alone, and that, there's probably people in your community or that you interact with in your daily life that may also be on a dementia journey, but people don't really talk about it. So it's a good thing to talk about, even just to say, well, my mom's not well, I'm taking care of her. And then that elicits a comment, and they might say, oh, well, my mom's not well. She has dementia. What's wrong with your mom?
Yeah,
I was just in so many conversations that start like that.
Yes.
And then, reading is so important. And that's why we developed AlzAuthors. We wanted to connect the caregivers with the books that are out there, because there's just like this gap. People don't understand a lot of times the what you can gain from reading a book. A lot of people, I've had people even tell me, why do I need to read about it? I'm living it. But it's like, you read somebody else's story and you might learn from them, maybe some strategies or even different attitude or a perspective that is going to be of a benefit to you and to your loved one. And
Absolutely.
So it's really important to spend a little time every day reading a book, listening to an audiobook, podcast, websites, blogs, whatever you find that speaks to you, and try to learn as much as you can. And it changes every day. I mean, dementia changes the whole family dynamic constantly. Just when you think you
Right.
got it figured out, the next day nothing works.
Right.
And so that's just so frustrating. But
Yes.
you can learn from other people, and other people want to share what they've learned. Most of the people who have written the books in our collection have been through this experience and survived it and learned, and
Yes.
they don't want the knowledge to die with them.
Right. Yeah.
Burning desire to, this was hell, but this is what I got out of it, and I want to help the next person. If one person reads my book and it makes their journey easier to bear, then I feel like I've done my work.
Absolutely. I know Dora wanted to make a comment or ask a question.
I wondered if anyone had experience with using one of your books as more of like a support group. Like I just think it would be a great avenue because some people don't want to open up, but like right now, if we were just to continue for another hour, I would love to have you all as my support group, even though my journey with my mother-in-law is done, but my journey with my sister has begun. You know what I'm saying? Like, and talk about the aspects of the book as a support group, because I think it could maybe make it easier for some people to open up to say, yeah, I understand what Jack's going through, or I don't know. Has anyone ever done that? I'm just thinking my brain is always spinning, and I'm like, I could go to the support group in town and say, hey, have you ever considered reading this book and using that as a tool for your support group?
Yeah, that's happened with me. And when it would be like a book club, but the people who are attracted to it are the people who are like living it for the most part. They're looking for something. So then they would open up, and then the discussion would start evolving around all of the caregivers. They'd start talking amongst each other. And I know that's happened like to Jean Lee, who's one of the founding members with her book, Alzheimer's Daughter. She's talked about that many, many times, where it would just become like a support group session at the end.
Right.
So yeah, they are. And whether it doesn't even matter if it's any kind of a book, a memoir, a novel, even caregiver guides, poetry books, children's books, they really can help people have conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want one more comment. So the last book club, which was June, I think, right? I ordered your book like that night because I wanted to be ready. But then we had all this time, and I read it like I couldn't wait for it to get here. And it got here, and I read it so fast. Like, it was so great. I just have to say, I really learned a lot. I really enjoyed it. So thank you so much. It was great. It was really great. And I think it's funny because I had asked before that I'd email Marianne, and I have a friend whose mom was recently diagnosed, and I said, could you recommend a book for her just to begin? And Marianne told me some other book. I don't remember what it was, but I was like, why didn't you just tell me your book? Because I think it is kind of I don't know, a good kind of an entry, because you learn so much from the story. It's like a soft opening, I guess.
Yeah.
So
We get shy about recommending our own.
I suppose you do. Yes.
I try to match it with, like, if it's somebody caring for their mother, it's about caring for your mother.
Yeah.
When caring for your husband, that's like a totally different dynamic.
Yeah. I know. Can you just just real quick, tell me what books you've all written again? I read yours. I'm pointing at you, Vicki.
Well, Christy's next week. Christy's next month, or this month.
Christy's yours?
Yeah.
Oh,
Later
good.
this month.
I'll get on and order that right away. I've got the Alzheimer library going on. Okay.
You do. You're amazing.
Oh, good. I'll add my book.
What's your book?
My mother has Alzheimer's, and my dog has tapeworms, A Caregiver's Tale, with my first initial R, my middle name Lynn, and my last name Barnett. And I must apologize. I was on a computer that wasn't working. You said, Lynn, where are you from? And the computer just went away. But I'm from Atlanta, but that's what it is. My mother has Alzheimer's, and my dog has tapeworms, A Caregiver's Tale.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sue, did you write a book?
I've got a poetry book called Gravel Road Ahead, and a memoir called No Way Out of This.
Oh,
Yeah.
gravel overhead. Isn't that true? Okay. The new one there with the orange.
With the orange thing on my head, yeah.
Did you write
I'm
a
the
book too?
author. Excuse me? Yeah. I'm a new member of AlzAuthors, and my book is a memoir. It's called Melted Away, a memoir of climate change and caregiving in Peru.
Oh, wow.
It's about the time when I was an environmental reporter in Peru, and I had an estranged father in Florida, and I ended up bringing him to Peru for elder care in Lima. And it's kind of all about my cross-cultural adventures caring for him there. So Melted Away, the glaciers are melting away and my dad's cognition is melting away.
Oh, wow, that sounds great. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
Vicky has a book too.
Vicky does.
I've read Vicky's book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Somebody stole my
Vicky has
iron.
several.
Yeah,
Yes.
Vicky was in the book club, and so was Ruth, who was here earlier.
Yeah.
I read that one too.
They're on the.
Yeah.
Anybody wants to catch up? They're on the podcast or they're on the YouTube.
Yeah.
You can get the replay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Dor. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and close up because we are at time. And I just want to say thank you for attending Aging and Amazing's Books and Chit Chat with AlzAuthors. We'd love to see you at our next book discussion on Tuesday, August 27th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, when I get to be the guest author to discuss my book, Building a Legacy of Love, Thriving in the Sandwich Generation. You may learn more and register for the event in the Books and Chit Chat channel in the Aging and Amazing community or by visiting AlzAuthors.com. I also invite you to be among the first to know everything new at AlzAuthors as a subscriber to our weekly newsletter. Sign up at AlzAuthors.com, then check your inbox each week for our news, introducing our latest author, podcast, special events, and more. And be sure to visit our blog, podcast, and shop at AlzAuthors.com to find more resources for your dementia journey. You can also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, or X, Instagram, and LinkedIn, where we share a wealth of resources for the dementia journey. Remember, you are not alone. One can sing a lonely song, but we chose to form a choir and create harmony. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's been a delight.
Appreciate seeing everybody. It means a lot to us when you guys come out.
Yeah.
Great session. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Untangling Alzheimer's and Dementia, an AlzAuthors podcast. For more details on this episode, please see the show notes. If you enjoyed the podcast, please leave a review and subscribe to it on whichever platform you use to listen to your favorite podcasts. For more information on AlzAuthors, please visit AlzAuthors.com. While you're there, be sure to browse our online bookstore, where you will find hundreds of carefully vetted books on Alzheimer's and dementia. You can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Please email your thoughts on the podcast to AlzAuthors@gmail.com. We are a 501c3 charitable organization, totally reliant on donations to do what we do. If our authors' stories move you, please consider contributing to our cause. Remember, you are not alone. One can sing a lonely song, but we chose to form a choir and create harmony.
Hi, I'm Susan of AlzAuthors. When I was a caregiver for my mother with dementia, resources to educate and offer support were hard to come by. AlzAuthors believes in the power of storytelling to support and encourage those impacted by Alzheimer's and dementia. Custom Caregiver Collections is a customized collection of memoirs, novels, caregiver guides, children's books, and more. This collection of well-vetted books comes displayed in a beautifully crafted wooden tabletop bookshelf with AlzAuthors branding. Custom Caregiver Collections supports our goal of bringing real books to real people in real places and are perfectly suited for senior care communities, senior centers, doctors' offices, memory cafes, and professional or personal libraries. If you or your organization is interested in ordering or building a custom caregiver collection, We can guide you through choices of books written in many categories to support your needs. Want to build your own book collection? Contact us at alzauthors.com/ccc to get started.